Namaskar. Welcome to this session. So, we were considering the phenomenon of Duhkham, and with the help of example, that the thorn, which is capable of piercing, the foot, which is capable of being pierced, and therefore the sorrow coming, being pierced by a thorn. And there we were told that when we put on footwear and walk in the woods, despite the thorn present very much, it doesn't prick us, and our foot is not pricked, and therefore we are not sorrowed. So, putting on a footwear is a measure that we need to take so that the thorn doesn't prick us. So, in that example, we saw that the Purusa, as a metaphysical entity, is never pricked, but it is reflected entity, bhasamana chaitanya, seemingly conscious principle, that is pricked. So, the Rajo Gun in the mind itself is the one which is like a thorn which can prick, and the Sattva Gun in the mind itself, which is pricked and tormented. So it is Rajo Guna which is tormenting Sattva Guna. So this is the metapsychological exposition or explanation of the sorrow. And we saw that commentary of Vyasa, Kasmat tapakriyayaha karmasthatvat sattve karmani tapikriya na aparaname nishkriye kshetragne. So, the Purusa Tattvam metaphysically, ontologically, is incapable of being pierced. It is incapable of being done anything. Neither can be given pleasure, nor can be given sorrow, neither can be given pain, nor can be given delight. That's how it is a kshetragnya principle, and it is nishkriya tattva. And therefore, the Atma tattva is never vexed in its considering its metaphysical status. This is the postulation of the Sankhya. So there again another question comes up. That means it is not the Purusa which is suffering. Purusa is said to be Swami, the master. The Buddhi is said to be Sevaka, subservient. So that means it is the other principle. It is called parartham. It is other principle. So therefore, inquisitive mind puts a question here, that if the Duhkham is happening to Buddhi, Duhkham is happening to collocation of Prakriti or a constitution of Prakriti, and it is not really happening to Purusa itself. And Purusa is aparinamini, according to Sankhya metaphysics. It is aparinami, it is avikari. So, that is why it is called kshetragnya. Then, if it is the other principle suffering, why bother about it? And how tormentation of other principle and then its enfranchisement from that sorrow becomes purushartha, because moksha is a purushartha, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, and moksha is counted as purushartha. But when the sorrow is not happening to Purusha, if it is happening to the bhasamana chaitanyam and is happening to buddhi tattva, it is happening to buddhi, which is the other principle, why then salvation of other principle, emancipation of other principle becomes purushartha? So if such a question is asked, then the Siddhantins answer it in following words, that it is perfect, that the Purusa is not tormented, it is the other principle is tormented, self is not tormented, something other than self, the non-self is tormented, and then considering the emancipation of the suffering of the non-self becomes purushartha. If this question is posed, it means that one is not aware of Bhoga Mimamsa. So one is not really aware of Bhoga, experience. Now, if this sorrow is experience of the buddhi, then the argument says that why should bother about the experience of buddhi where it is not experience of the self? If the self is tormented, if I am tormented, I should try to get the salvation, emancipation from sorrow, but then somebody else's sorrow, when it is considered to be prevented and overcome, which is other principle, not self principle, it is other than the self, okay, that might be magnanimity. But then how does it become purushartha is the question. Because the liberation is going to happen to buddhi. Then if the liberation is going to happen to buddhi, why it should be considered as purushartha, the purpose of the Purusa? So this question will not arise in the mind of a person who is aware of phenomenon of bhogam. So it shows unfamiliarity, anabhignyata, ignorance about bhogam. No doubt Purusa is aparinamini. The Purusa is aparinamini tattva, and yet the Duhkham of buddhi becomes purushartha. So this is because of the phenomenon, the other principle almost becomes oneself. This is the Maya. It is called darshita vishayam, darshita vishayatvam of Purusa. So Purusa is something that we have already considered, darshita vishayatvat. Darshita vishayatvat sattve tu tapyamane tadakaranurodhi purusho anutapyate iti. In metapsychology, no doubt the buddhi is tormented. But how is this buddhi? The buddhi is seemingly conscious. And there is a ditto similarity between the metaphysical self and the real self. Metaphysical self and this seemingly conscious bhasamana chaitanyam. So there is a seeming experience on the Purusa. not the real experience of the Purusha, but the virtual experience of the Purusha. Therefore, although the Purusha doesn't have sorrow, there is a virtual sorrow to Purusha because of the reflections. We had considered the double reflection theory. So, because there is sorrow by reflection, and to overcome that even reflection, it is necessary that the Purusha, the Buddhi doesn't have sorrow. The Buddhi must be emancipated. The Buddhi must be emancipated, so the Buddhi itself will not now contain sorrow, now will get sorrow, and therefore it won't be reflected into the Purusha Tattvam, and then therefore there won't be re-reflection of Purusha Tattvam of the nature of being harassed and tormented. It will be of the nature of being unharassed, unscathed, untormented, and that is necessary. Otherwise, in Bhogam, the subjective entity seems to be really the suffering or having delight. All experiences come to seemingly conscious principle, but then there is a reflection cast on the metaphysical entity of Purusha, the being darshita vishayatvat, being darshita vishayatvam there. So, the Purusha seems to be taking tadakaranurodi. Whatever is the state of the mind seems to be the state of self. That is why when the mind is sorrowed, actually, we end up claiming that I am sorrowed. This is because of the reflection. When you are delighted, your mind is delighted, is the fact, is the reality. Actual reality is the mind is delighted, but then you end up saying, I am delighted. When the mind is sorrowed, you end up saying, I am sorrowed. This is because of the reflections happening in the metapsychological plane, and if this has to be averted, which is essential in liberation, therefore the measure taken in the form of moksham becomes purushartham. So the question can only come up by unsighting the Bhoga Mimamsa or the experience of Bhoga. And Patanjali has explained it amply. Vritti sarupyam itaratra sattva purushayoho atyanta asankirnayoho. In that sutra of the third chapter, pratyaya vishesho bhogaha pararthat swartha samyamat purusha jnanam. So what is that bhoga? That phenomenon of casting reflections continuing. Sattva Purusha Anyata Khyati is what is in us, and therefore it is countered by Sattva Purusha Anyata Khyati. So Sattva Purusha Samyata Khyati is what is our mundane state, worldly state. We think we are that. And therefore, this identicality needs to be overcome. And therefore, the Bhoga Mimamsa tells us that that's why in Sankhya there is Kaivalyam, there is moksham of Prakriti as well as Purusha. The first moksham of Prakriti and the Buddhi, and Buddhi being liberated, now the Purusha also is not affected. So, it is because of the reflection phenomenon in the metapsyche, which Patanjali speaks of it quite often, that is the Bhoga, that is the process of Bhoga. And then when Bhoga Mimamsa is considered, then we know that the ever-free Purusha, ever-free Atma needs to be freed by disjunction. And that is why that's Viyoga is the measure here. We have seen the Samyoga is the cause of Hetu, and the Viyoga therefore is necessary. So Viyoga means now separation between Sattva and Purusa. When there is separation, then there won't be casting reflection business. And that is why it is Purushartham. So, therefore, we must be familiar with certain metapsychological precepts which have come in Yoga Sutra. The Purusa is no doubt a drashta. And now why it is drashta, why it is seer? Because it has a scene. What is this scene? The scene entity is Buddhi. So, this contact between Prakriti Purusa in the form of drashta and drushya is the cause of pain and cause of sorrow in the form of not the sensation of sorrow, but the delimited condition, which results into bhoga, sukha bhoga, dukkha bhoga. The both have to come to an end. The phenomenal, empirical, worldly pain pleasure have to end for moksha. Then you will have that transcendent essential bliss. We never have bliss in this world, which we can say essential bliss. Although we have blissful states, they are only delights, and they are not essential blissful states. The essential blissful state is when the self abides in its own pristine form. That's the Kaivalya. Being isolated from Prakriti, the Purusa abides and stays and gets established in its own form. And then there is that essential bliss. That essential bliss is the bliss which is in the Upanishadic statement of Satchidanandam, Anandam. In the worldly realm, we get Vishayanandas, and Vishayananda itself becomes a bliss for us. So it is not essential bliss. So that is why, anyway, now we understand why it becomes a Purushartha, to be emancipating the other one, the Buddhi Sattva. Emancipation of the other one, the Buddhi Tattva, Buddhi Sattvam, from any bhoga would also set aside any seeming bhoga in the Purusa, Atma Tattva. And therefore it becomes Purushartha. So, that is how we have tackled that question also, which came our way. Now, let me tell you, in any philosophical system of the Oriental culture, Darshana Shastra, there are certain branches which we considered in course of our discussion, such as epistemology, called Pramana Mimamsa, cosmology, called Vishwa Prasuti Sangatana Mimamsa, then ontology, teleology. So therein, the metaphysical summum bonum is also mentioned, called Parama Purushartham. And this Parama Purushartha Prapti is also purpose of Darshana Shastras. So apart from other branches of philosophy, the Darshana Shastra that we have often considered, which are epistemology, ontology, teleology, cosmology, psychology, theology, the emancipation is also a branch of Darshana Shastra. And that is being touched in the discussion on this particular sutra. So, the drashtru drushya sanyoga is said to be heya hetu, and then drashtru drushya vyogam would be hanam, and that would be the moksham and kaivalyam. So far, we have considered heyam and heya hetuhu. Now, logically, the next of the four, which is hanam, should come up for discussion. Because you should recall that we considered that fourfold aspects in Patanjali's philosophy, taking the core position in the Darshana Shastra. Heyam, heya hetu, hanam, hanopayaha. But we have considered only two so far, heyam and heya hetuhu. So logically we must be going for hanam and then hanopayaha. But rather than going to the third and fourth facets of the fourfold concept which was enunciated at the beginning, Patanjali, because of the the educative system in his darshanas, he makes us aware of the two things. Because here two principles were brought in called drashta and drushya. Drashtru drushyayoho sanyogha heya hetuhu was mentioned. Now, what is drashta and what is drushya remains to be delineated. Because the conjunction of the two is cause of sorrow. First cause of sorrow, primeval cause of sorrow, first ever cause of sorrow, and that has to be eradicated, is what is suggested and is expressly mentioned. But then, what is drashta and what is drushya needs to be given exposition. So Patanjali, before going to the hanam and hanopaya, takes on anvil the concept of first drushya. Now, according to Sutra, drashtru drushyayoho sanyogaha. So he is not taking the first principle of union and conjunction, but the second principle of union and conjunction. So he says second union with the first, second united with the first. Union of the second with the first is cause of sorrow, but he first discusses second. And it is so important to discuss the scene category because it is kaleidoscopic category. It takes all colors, all shapes, all forms, and therefore he decides to take up the drishyam first and then explain the drashta. The conjunction of the two is the cause of sorrow. The conjunction of the two means that one and two must be mentioned, described, delineated upon. So he takes up the second principle of conjunction, which is drushya category. And now he proceeds to give exposition to that scene category. Because how the union takes place and why for the union and how the union is to be understood. To understand now the two principles of union must be understood. So therefore he first opts to describe the two factors of the union, and out of the two he takes first the second one, which is all fascinating. It is quite interesting to understand why the second principle has been taken. So he is now going to describe the drushya category. Generally it is called prakriti. And the Prakriti is now being described. Drishyam is being described. And therefore he brings out a wonderful sutra which is going to describe the essential status, characteristic of the Prakriti. Ontological description of Prakriti. That is what the Prakriti is ontologically. Because we know the nature around us, and this nature is the form of various natural phenomena, mountains and oceans and rivers and forests and whatnot. That is the nature around us. That's a manifest nature. Then this nature is called Prakriti. So what is the essential nature of the Prakriti? Would become ontology. So the sutra to follow will tell us about ontological status of gunas, then teleology of the nature, what is the purpose of the nature. Because otherwise for layman, many things in the nature are considered to be useless. And maybe a very materialistic man will say, why this has been there? It should have not been there, it would have been better for me. Had there been no mosquitoes, no bed bugs, no serpents and no reptiles and no crocs and no tigers and no lions, I would have been safe. So we think all these things should not have been there. And we think there is superfluity in many aspects of the nature. Common man doesn't understand why there is 70% of planet covered by ocean. That's why we are losing the land space. We cannot be residing in waters. Then 70% of the surface is occupied by water and only 30% is available for life to, or human being to reside on it. So therefore a materialistic person says instead of 70% water, there should have been 30% water and 70% ocean. 30% ocean. So then we would have a lot of space to take up on the planet. So materialistic man sees so many things useless. Why this sky over the head? And why these billions of stars twinkling at night? What purpose do they have? So the materialistic man thinks that in the creation, if the creation is believed to be the God's creation, the common man thinks there is too much of waste. Now, we are only able to stay on the planet, live on the planet. Then why the solar system? And why the galaxy? It all seems to be waste for a very materialistic man. So, common man, materialistic man, ignorant man thinks there is a lot of waste in the creation of the archetypal mind, because most of the things don't appear to be useful for us. And what is not useful for us is deemed to be useless by the self-centric materialistic people. So when there is Prakriti occupying immeasurable space in the Brahmanda universe, we think most of the things are wasteful because they are not useful for you and me. They are not useful for you and me here. They are not useful for you and me here and now. So, the layman is not aware of what is called as teleology. What is the purpose behind creation? What is the purpose behind all that is around us? What is the purpose behind all that is cognized by us and that is not cognized by us? Many things in the universe are not seen by us, we are not able to see. Even the neighboring galaxy called Andromeda. We are not able to see. Then there are so many things that we are not able to see, and yet most of the universe is unseen by us. What is seen by us is paltry bit, absolutely paltry bit. 0.00000000000000000000000001% or even less than that we are able to see and experience. And the whole huge mass of 99.999999999999999 raised to n is purposeless for us. We are not seen. We have not seen. We are not able to see. And therefore, in philosophical system, there is a subject matter called as teleology. What is the purpose of all this? It doesn't believe in a condition that something is waste. Nothing is waste here. In this astronomically expanding universe and expanded universe and ever expanding universe, nothing is purposeless. And that is why common man is not aware of this branch of metaphysics as to what is the purpose of all this. So the sutra is also going to tell us about the purpose. And then its form. The form of the universe, the form of universe which is constituted by Prakriti, the purpose of universe which is of the Prakriti. So one sutra is going to tell us about the nature of Prakriti, ontological status of Prakriti, the teleological purpose behind Prakriti, and the form in which the universe is manifesting. We only know two aspects of universe, seen and unseen, seeable and unseeable. But then what is, according to metaphysics, the classification? Is it only known and unknown, seeable and unseeable? So that classification, the form of Prakriti, in what different forms the Prakriti manifests. We know it is diversified nature, diverse nature, immensely expanding nature, already expanded nature, and ever expanding nature. So in what form it is expanding? So the form of Prakriti, essential nature of Prakriti, and the purpose of Prakriti. This is encapsulated in one sutra that is going to follow, which is 2.18. This is called Drushya category because Drushya is one of the component of conjunction that we saw in our previous discussions of Heya Hetuhu. So that component, which is Drushya, seen category, is now being described in the sutra to follow and the sutra following that. In two sutras, Patanjali is going to mention the prolific subject matter of metaphysics. Cosmology, ontology, teleology. And ontology of the Prakriti, teleology of Prakriti, or teleology behind Prakriti, and the cosmology of unfoldment of Prakriti. So these are branches of metaphysics which will be discussed in two sutras. Meagerly, just two sutras are expanded on it. And in two sutras he is going to mention. And now we are going to take up one of the two sutras. So that is 2.18. So So Drushya category is described in sutras. Prakasha kriya sthiti shilam bhutendriyatmakam bhoga apavargartham drushyam. And in the following sutra, the 19th, Vishesha Vishesha Linga Matrani Vishesha Vishesha Linga Matra Alingani Gunaparvani. So there are Vishesha Parva, Avishesha Parva, Linga Parva, Alinga Parva. The Prakriti is in 4 phases. It manifests in 4 phases, it unfolds in 4 phases, and also it enfolds in 4 phases. So, this will completely deal with the subject matter of metaphysics called matter. Now try to understand what is the matter in physics. What is the discussion of matter in physics? And what is the matter in metaphysics? In very primary physics, we know the matter is either gaseous, solid, or liquid. So this is very primary physics. Then on a little higher level of physics, then we are told about atomic structure of the physics, that there are atoms and then atoms have particles, and that is all. The physics stops at particle physics. It mentions up to particles and its inquiry ends at the particles. It doesn't go beyond the 3 particles, proton, neutron, electron. So there is nuclear physics and then there is particle physics. So elemental physics and atomic physics or nuclear physics and then particle physics, and that which lies well beyond the particle physics is metaphysics, and philosophical systems deal with metaphysics. One of the Shat Darshanas had dealt with physics. That is called Vaisheshika Darshana of Kanada. So that deals with the physics. And that also discusses physics totally differently than the physics discussed by the physicists of our times. And that is why Kanada's system is also a philosophical system. So it is fascinating to look at what Kanada is going to describe and why he is going to describe the physics. And modern physics, the why of the physics is totally different than the why of the physics of classical physics of Darshana system, which is Nyaya Vaisheshika dual and particularly Vaisheshika Darshanam. Vaisheshika Darshana inquires into physics for the sake of dharma. And that is why he commences with inquiry, Atato dharma vyakhyasya. Dharma, for the sake of dharma, there has been inquiry into physics in philosophical system, while in physics of today, the dharma is taken at perhaps at a counter position. So that's the difference between the physics of philosophers, for which you have to look into Vaisheshika Darshanam of Kanada, Prashastapada Bhashya of Kanada, and the whole classical texts available in Vaisheshika Darshanam. So that will tell you, it will introduce you physics totally differently. And a modern physics which is considering dharma as alien, or it is of no concern, neglect and overlooking it. We know the consequence of it that we are facing today. In the material world, the human problems are not solved. Human being has been convenienced with the help of technology, but human problems have grown exponentially. The humanness in human being is going away with technology. Humanness in human being is facing a discouragement and no encouragement. Whereas in physics of Indic system of Vaisheshika Darshanam, that is not the case, because that's why he begins it. Athato dharma vyakhyasya. It is for the sake of dharma. He is trying to understand the physics. What are these things? We should understand from the dharma perspective the physics around us, the matter around us. Because the matter must be used for our upliftment in dharma. Dharma vyavahara, dharma palanam. So that's the physics of the Oriental world, and particularly the Indic system. Anyway, but then metaphysics is beyond even that, and all other philosophies, Sankhya, Vedanta, they have given major stress on metaphysics of this universe. And Patanjali will be discussing that in 2 sutras, Prakasha Kriya Sthiti Sheelam, Bhutendriyatmakam, Bhoga Apavargartham Drishyam, Vishesha Vishesha Linga Alingani, Linga Madra Alingani Gunaparvani. So 2.18 and 2.19 are the 2 sutras which are going to give complete exposition to this infinite expanse of nature in all its manifestations, in all its facets, from all its peripheral manifestations to core conditions of Prakriti will be dealt with. So we are going to discuss the Drishya Tattvam, which is one of the factors of the conjunction which is causing sorrow, which is the cause of sorrow, the first and foremost cause of sorrow, which has to be set aside, which the conjunction has to be broken into disjunction, and then only there will be that Parama Purushartham, Moksham, Kaivalyam, Nirvanam. Anyway, the Drishya Tattva is being discussed, which is one of the parties to conjunction causing the sorrow of a very kind, the sorrows of we people on the planet, the mundane human creatures, to the human beings on the final rung of consciousness. So that is the Drishya Tattvam. So we will commence that in our next session. Namaskar all of you.